While the reality of climate change is clearly upon us, the Supreme Court has now for the first time made it clear that we as citizens have rights to a clean environment and against the adverse effects of climate change. The ruling is profound. It means that the right against climate change is a distinct, fundamental and human right. Here are a couple of key points in that ruling. Now here are exact quotes in fact. It's yet to have been articulated that people have a right against the adverse effects of climate change, is what the Supreme Court has mentioned in its order. As the havoc caused by climate change increases year by year, it becomes necessary to articulate this as a distinct right. It is recognized by Articles 14, which is the right to equality, and 21, which is the right to life, is what the Supreme Court has said. Now, in passing the judgment which looked at the survival of a critically endangered bird species, the Supreme Court introduced several paragraphs focusing on climate change. Significantly, the court made a clear connection between climate change and the need for a clean, stable environment. The court said the right to health is impacted due to factors such as air pollution, shifts in vector-borne diseases, rising temperatures, drought, shortages in food supplies because of crop failure, storms and flooding. The inability of underserved communities to adapt to climate change or cope with its effects violates the right to life as well as to the right of equality. Finally, the Supreme Court made the point that when it comes to human rights, a violation to the right of a healthy environment has a clearly defined link to rights being impacted across domains. The right to health, the right to housing, the right to water, unequal energy access, it's all interconnected and needs to be seen in that way. All right, so that's a very important verdict by the Supreme Court. What are the implications of this? I'm joined by the petitioner, Dr. M.K. Ranjit Singhvi, Shadant Farasat, the advocate in the Supreme Court, and Afroz Shah, the lawyer and environmental activist. Thanks very much. Shadant, let me come to you first. How important is it for people in this country, for you and me, to actually say that my rights are being violated by air pollution, or my rights are being violated by climate change? We could talk about it, but we have legal basis now. What are the implications?
Yeah, just two things. So the context in which this has come is that the Great Indian Bustard is the largest flying bird. And there was a earlier direction of the Supreme Court which said that overhead lines, that is electricity transmission lines, should not be put in an area in Western India where which is the habitat of these birds. So in the context of defining that habitat and partly restricting it, the court has examined this question. In my sense, this is more like a obiter observation, which obiter in legal parlance we mean that something which did not directly arise in for the granting the relief in this matter, but nevertheless it was somewhat of a connected issue. So the real play, you're right that the right against environmental change has been recognized. Right against air pollution, etc., has always been there as part of Article 21. The question is, it's now recognized as a separate head. So I would say that really speaking, what impact it has will depend on more concrete cases where this right is then sought to be asserted directly against certain actions of the government or certain other environmental follies which are happening. But it's welcome that at least as a distinct category, it's now juridically and jurisprudentially recognized.
Okay. Afroz, you've been fighting for years and years for the environment in the country. You've helped clean up beaches among so many other things in the country. Now that this clear link has been done on how our fundamental rights are being violated, what are the implications of this and how does this help, for example, your work?
First of all, we must distinguish between, as a lawyer, I must say that between rights and remedies. Supreme Court may say that you have a right, but if there is no remedy available, then how many times does a citizen go to the court and ask, can we enforce it? As a lawyer, we have seen it over the years, thousands of orders passed in different matters. As a law student, we heard about MC Mehta and all, go on and on and on. But is it right for a citizen to ever come to the court always saying that, oh, my right is violated, help me, the judges must help me? And two lines in this judgment which strikes me the most, which Justice Chandrachud put it very succinctly. He says, though international solar arrangements we are following due to some arrangement between India and other nations, which is absolutely great, But there is no law on this country on solar or climate change or environmental pollution. Look at the Environmental Protection Act. It stems from an international treaty. So is this order. How can not a parliament pass laws? Look at our constitutional scheme. You have the powers distributed between under Schedule 7, List 1, List 2, 3. Environmental protection does not find a mention in all the schedule. So you look for residuary entry under entry 27, List 1, to say that the government has power to do it or the parliament has a power to do it. So these are, orders are good. Getting it on the front page headlines is good. But at the end of the day, what will be the effect at the ground? That's so important. If the government or the parliament does not wake up to make good laws and good implementable laws, we will be debating in the television studio about, oh God, the 3-judge bench did this, the 3-judge bench did that. But having said that, let me add a caveat to this. It's a fundamental enunciation by Chief Justice Chandrachud on right to be free from adverse climate change. Not many jurisdictions all over the globe have touched upon it. And I'm very happy our Honorable Supreme Court has touched upon it. Now, the Parliament and the government must take the initiative and try to make as good implementable law at the ground to prove to the citizen that they mean business. Otherwise, this one-off case of Great Indian Bastard, whether overhead towers must be there or, low voltage towers, how to put it underground. These are all technicalities which must be left to the experts. The experts must decide whether you want to put it overhead or lowhead. And finally, that's what Justice Chandrachud did by recalling the previous order by Chief Justice Bobde, saying that you must leave it to the expert. Let the expert come with it. You can't say that put the overhead wire or lowerhead. And those must be based on evidence. Maybe the previous order which Chief Justice Chandrachud recalled was not based on evidence according to him, and he's recalled it. To the larger picture, to every citizen, Vishnu, who's hearing me, we work in the domain where we don't ask from this country anything. We want to serve this country. We want to give back to this country. We have been asking for so long for everything from this country. And for a moment, I'm not saying that please don't vote out your government if they don't start up to your expectation. But having said that, there is something much more needed to be done other than just the Supreme Court order. The Parliament must step in to fill the vacuum. There must be a constitutional amendment done to the scheme of the powers, on especially where environmental laws. That's my take on this.
Okay. Dr. M.K. Ranjit Singh, in as much as it's welcome what the Supreme Court has done in actually putting a legal basis to some of the rights which we were otherwise losing, this is actually about a critically endangered bird species. Could you tell us about how this has been a battle that you fought for a very long period of time, and what are the implications for the Great Indian Bustard? Go ahead, sir.
Firstly, I think, if I may be permitted,
yes,
I think it is totally misleading, and it is misguiding both the court and the nation to say either we fulfill our needs for alternate energy or save the bustard. Both can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, do we have to cover the last remaining habitat of the bustard in the world where they're breeding? The prioritized area. Do we have to cover them to meet with our need for alternate energy? Of course not. There are many other places. And anybody who says that this is the only way to meet it is unfortunately misleading the court and the nation. So, because, and this is not just for the bustard, it is for the local people who practice animal husbandry to save the orans, which are heritage sites and sacred groves, all that. So one is that. There are many other places you can have that alternate energy. And let me run through this very quickly. There is a line running through. The Gujarat government did a wonderful job of covering all the canals with solar panels. Why can't this be done in Gujarat and Rajasthan, where there is 900 kilometers of the canal running? You don't have to acquire land. You don't have to put electricity lines. You are covering the water and therefore preventing evaporation, which is so important to prevent in the desert. And most important of all, you have water underneath. These panels require huge amounts of water to clean those areas, to clean the surface. It's been calculated that 30 gigawatts of solar panel or any energy requires from 1100 to 3100 crore liters of water. In the desert, you're going to mine water. That water should go for drinking purposes. Don't people have a right to water in the desert? Does it have to clean panels?
Sure.
Can it not be done by covering what was done in Gujarat? Why don't we cover that 900 kilometers? That's one part of the story.
Okay, Dr. Ranjit Singh. Go ahead.
The second part is that even there you can take, the lines are there. It's been proven you can take them underground. Something like 18 to 20% of the losses in the past years, Wildlife Institute report, has resulted in the death of bustards. The bustard cannot sustain that. Why don't you take those lines underground which are there? One is the solar panel covering the area for other uses other than just the solar panel covering. The second is to take the lines which are there and future underground.
Okay, Dr. Ranjit Singh, I take the points that you are mentioning and the focus on what you are saying, sir. But sir, I'm only interrupting you because we have only a limited amount of time, and I wanted to go across to Sunita. I understand the points you're mentioning and the significance of that as the petitioner focusing on this critically endangered bird. But Sunita, I actually want to go back to what I was also looking at, the right against climate change. And I think what is important is, for the first time, the Supreme Court, in talking about our rights, Article 14 and 21 protects us against the right, protects us from climate change, right? Significantly, the court makes a connection between climate change and the need for a clean, stable environment, right? That is also a part of our rights. Yeah. You can't look at the environment and then say, okay, but I'm talking about the environment, I'm not talking about air pollution. How important is that linkage from a legal standpoint now?
So, Vishnu, the court has taken its own work a step ahead. The fact is, the Supreme Court had already defined the right to life, which all of us have as a fundamental right, as the right to a clean environment as well. And if you see that the fight against air pollution with the Supreme Court was leading for many years and has made some very major changes, was under the right to life and the right to clean environment. The Chief Justice now has actually helped us to redefine it even further, to say now the right to life is not just a right to a clean environment, but also a right to fight against climate change, which really means that the actions that, in India, we're looking at co-benefits. We're looking at how do you clean up air and how do you also make sure that you can win against the war against climate change? I'm not sure how an Indian right to climate change can work further, but the big question is the losses and damages that the farmers are suffering today because of the varying weather events. We have one extreme weather event a day. It's breaking the backs of farmers.
Right.
Does this mean that the right to climate change is about the loss and damages that they're suffering and the need for compensation to them? So I think it opens up a whole area of work. But clearly, as Dr. Ranjit Singh was also saying and others were saying, I think a lot of these rights now are going to be walking that balance, because at the end of the day, if we want clean energy, but if that clean energy comes at the cost of environment, it's also not going to be as clean as we all want it to be.
And Shraddhan, now that we have certain rights, how does one gain from the rights that we have? If I was to sue a company, or if I was to sue a government, climate change is such a large issue. Air pollution is such a large issue. There are hundreds of sources of air pollution, for example, in our own city, in Delhi, right? So I have the right, and I can say that I am within my rights to say that my health is being affected. But how can the court protect me?
Yeah, so that's the thing with Article 21 rights. Declarations are easy, implementations are more challenging, right? And that we have seen that in the last 30, 40 years, ever since the Supreme Court has been expanding. And I think other panelists also pointed out, Afroz pointed out how we have a right, but it's, in Delhi, we all have a right against air pollution, right? It's been declared long back, but every 4 months we suffer the bad winter here with all the pollution. So you're absolutely right. But I think that the important thing in this is that, like Sunita ji said, climate change is a reality. It's impacting us daily. Now you have a language to challenge it in court, and they will do it in writ court, in a high court, or in the Supreme Court. Whole host of things I can think of which will arise in litigation over, say, the next 10 to 15 years, right? This is just the beginning point today, a very small beginning, if I may say, one paragraph, 2 sentences here and there. But it's a beginning point, and a lot of litigation will happen, right from people losing their livelihood because of changed environments, or coastal areas, how it's impacting island portions in within India, how the habitat of people is getting impacted. So all of those things can be litigated, and they will be litigated in a writ court, which is obviously more challenging because facts you have to prove and plead, and it has to be obvious case on facts. Even with the declared law, it has to be obvious case on facts to even succeed. But you will succeed in some. Sure. Maybe, if you file 10 cases, you will succeed in 3 and 4 and you lose on 6, because obviously this is not an absolute right. The court will also balance this right against other rights. Right? That's the way any exercise is done. But it's a good beginning point. The language for that challenge is now available to us. And I see a lot of potential litigation over an expanded period of time, because climate change will be at least the biggest challenge of our future life going forward.
There's no doubt about that. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. Sunita, I know you had something to say. If you have something to say, you've got exactly 30 seconds. Yes or no, go ahead if you want.
No, just to say, I completely agree. This is the beginning. This is good that the right has been expanded. And I can see, just like the right to life being expanded to the right to a clean environment, I see the possibility of us being able to use that to be able to make the change. So I think it's a good step ahead.
All right, thank you very much. And Dr. M.K. Ranjit Singh ji, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. It's a landmark moment in terms of the verdict as it applies to you and the protection of that critically endangered species. You can't hear me right now. But I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. Out of time on this program. From all of us here, good night.